The human female was dying, and frankly I couldn't have cared less. Well, that's not entirely accurate. I cared enough to watch through the observation dome of my ship the whispered truth, as her small form collapsed against the twisted metal remains of what these primitive beings called a communication array. But caring and actually doing something about it, those were two entirely different concepts in my species' philosophy. My name is Crick Snuffle, and I belong to the monitoring collective of the Outer Spiral Territories. For the past 3 rotations I'd been assigned the monumentally boring task of cataloging the final days of Species 7. You know them as humans, though why they chose such an unremarkable designation for themselves remains one of their many puzzling characteristics. The evacuation ships had departed from Earth exactly 47 hours, 12 minutes and 18 seconds ago. Not that I was counting, mind you. The collective's calculations predicted complete atmospheric collapse within 60 hours of the final transport's departure. Standard protocol. Monitor. Document. File report. Move on to the next dying world. Except this particular human female refused to follow protocol. She'd been left behind during the evacuation. Not deliberately. I assumed, though with humans one could never be entirely certain. They had a disturbing tendency toward both self-sacrifice and spectacular oversight. This one appeared to be a victim of the latter, judging by the way she'd been frantically attempting to repair their broken communications equipment for the past 6 hours. Maya Holloway, according to the identification beacon still functioning weakly in her suit, 28 Earth years old, communications specialist, 3rd class. The kind of human who operated behind the scenes while others took credit for her work. Her personnel file, which I'd accessed out of sheer boredom, painted a picture of competence overshadowed by chronic invisibility. Perfect irony, really. A communications expert who nobody seemed to hear, she was attempting something that my analysis systems categorized as technically impossible with available resources. The atmospheric processors that maintained Earth's rapidly declining oxygen levels required a specific frequency transmission to reset their emergency protocols. Without it, the planet would suffocate in its own industrial exhaust within hours. The problem: her equipment possessed roughly the same transmission capability as a particularly ambitious insect. I watched her work with the methodical precision that humans occasionally displayed when facing certain death. No panic, no dramatic speeches to the empty sky. Just stubborn, foolish determination to accomplish the impossible. Fascinating, I muttered to my ship's AI. A consciousness I'd nicknamed Patience due to its insufferable habit of pointing out obvious facts. The female appears to believe she can amplify a 50-watt transmitter to penetrate planetary atmospheric interference. Belief and capability rarely correlate in human behavior patterns. Patience replied in its annoyingly neutral tone. Current probability of success, 0.003%. So you are saying there's a chance? Sarcasm detected. Adjusting humor parameters. Don't you dare. Maya's hands moved with surprising efficiency despite the bulky environmental suit she wore. The suit itself was a marvel of human engineering, though not in any way the designers intended. Built for short-term atmospheric work, it was now serving as life support in an increasingly toxic environment. The modifications she'd made were creative. She'd cannibalized her emergency beacon, 2 portable data cores, and what appeared to be a food heating unit to create some sort of signal amplification array. The engineering was crude, desperate, and absolutely certain to fail, which made it perfectly human. Nithal, came a transmission from the collective's command nexus, interrupting my observations. Status report. I sighed, a habit I'd unfortunately picked up from extended human observation. Final subject exhibiting predictable terminal behavior. Atmospheric collapse proceeding on schedule. Nothing noteworthy to report. Acknowledged. Prepare for departure upon subject termination. Understood, command. The transmission ended, and I returned my attention to Maya. She'd managed to get her improvised equipment functioning, though functioning was perhaps too generous a term. Sparks flew from jury-rigged connections, and several components were literally held together with something humans called duct tape, a material that seemed to serve as their universal solution to engineering problems. She pressed her helmet against what remained of the original communication console, probably trying to hear something through bone conduction. A futile gesture, but it demonstrated the kind of desperate creativity that made humans simultaneously fascinating and frustrating to study. "Come on," she whispered, her voice barely audible through the suit's external speakers. "Just need enough power for one transmission. One signal." I found myself leaning forward despite my professional detachment. There was something compelling about watching a being refuse to accept inevitable death. My species had evolved past such irrational behavior cycles ago, which made humans endlessly perplexing. Maya began speaking to her equipment as if it were a living entity. "Okay, you beautiful, broken piece of junk. I know you have got one more miracle in you. I have seen you work magic with half the parts you are supposed to have." She was talking to a machine, not just giving voice commands, but actually conversing with an inanimate object as if it possessed consciousness. The psychological profiles indicated this was common human behavior during extreme stress, but witnessing it firsthand was oddly touching. Maya, to anyone listening, she broadcast on standard frequencies, her voice steady despite circumstances. "This is Communications Specialist Maya Holloway, Earth Station 7. I am attempting emergency atmospheric processor reset. If anyone is receiving this transmission, please relay the following sequence to the nearest collective monitoring station." Wait, she knew about us? I checked the surveillance data again. Nothing in her personnel file indicated awareness of collective presence. Humans weren't supposed to know we existed, much less how to contact us. Yet here she was, attempting to reach the nearest collective monitoring station as if such knowledge was commonplace. "Interesting development," Patience observed. "The human demonstrates unauthorized knowledge of our operational presence." "Indeed," I replied, though my attention was focused on Maya's next words. "I know you are out there," she continued, her voice gaining strength. "I have been tracking your passive scans for months. Your ships think they are invisible, but you leave electromagnetic signatures that our deep space arrays can detect if someone knows where to look." My manipulator appendages froze over the control interface. This primitive female had detected our stealth technology. "Furthermore," Maya said, and I could hear the smile in her voice, "I know you are probably watching right now, wondering how a backwater human figured out your game. Well, here's the thing about communications specialists, nobody tells you. We listen to everything, even things we are not supposed to hear." She'd been monitoring us for months. A single human, using equipment we dismissed as laughably primitive, had penetrated our surveillance operations through sheer auditory cleverness. "Wexnethel," she said, and my entire body went rigid. "Yes, I know your name too." "Ship designation," whispered Truth. "Monitoring Collective. Outer Spiral Territories. You have been very thorough in your observations, but your communication protocols aren't as secure as you think they are. Impossible. Our encryption was mathematically unbreakable by any technology level below what humans wouldn't achieve for another 1,000 years." "Your mistake," Maya continued, working on her equipment as she spoke, "was assuming that mathematics was the only way to break a code. But humans don't just think in numbers, we think in patterns, in music, in rhythms that don't follow logical progression." She was lecturing me. A dying human female was explaining the inadequacies of my species' cryptographic methods, while attempting to save her entire world with spare parts and determination. "Maya to Crix, Nithal," she said directly, looking up at my ship's position despite the fact that we were completely invisible to her visual spectrum. "I have a proposition for you." "How?" I whispered, then caught myself speaking aloud. "Your species values knowledge above all else," Maya continued. "I have been listening to your reports. You catalog everything, document every detail, preserve information like it's the most precious resource in the universe. And you know what? You are right. Information is precious." She'd managed to access our reports. I ran a full security diagnostic while she spoke, but found no evidence of intrusion. Our systems remained completely secure. "Here's what I'm offering," Maya said, her hands still working on her impossible project. "I will show you something about humans that your 1,000 years of observation have never documented. Something that will make your career in the collective, guarantee you advancement to the inner territories, maybe even earn you a seat on the High Council." My breathing apparatus quickened despite my attempts at professional calm. Advancement to the inner territories was the dream of every outer spiral monitor, A seat on the High Council was beyond imagination. But, Maya continued, and her voice carried a note of steel that I'd never heard in any human recording. You have to help me first. Not because you want to save my world, though that would be nice. Help me because you want to see what happens when a human finally stops whispering and starts screaming. The equipment around her suddenly flared to life, connections that should have failed holding steady, power flowing where none should exist. The signal strength indicators began climbing toward levels that should have been impossible with her equipment. How are you doing that? I asked, forgetting protocol entirely and opening a direct communication channel. Finally, Maya laughed, and the sound was unlike anything in our psychological profiles. Not the desperate laughter of terminal madness, but genuine amusement mixed with satisfaction. I was wondering when you'd stop pretending I couldn't hear you. Your transmission capability is insufficient for planetary atmospheric processor activation, I stated, falling back on facts and analysis. The power requirements exceed your equipment specifications by several orders of magnitude. You are absolutely right, Maya agreed cheerfully. This equipment can't possibly do what I need it to do. Good thing I'm not trying to use this equipment. I don't understand, of course you don't. Your species thinks in terms of tools and technology. You see a hammer and assume its only purpose is to hit nails. But we see a hammer and think, what else can this do? Can it be a lever? A weight? A musical instrument? She gestured to her improvised array, and I realized with growing amazement that she wasn't trying to amplify her transmitter at all. I'm not boosting the signal, Maya explained. I'm changing its nature entirely. You see, every living thing produces bioelectrical fields. Plants, animals, humans. Even the atmospheric processors themselves have organic components that generate measurable electrical signatures. My analysis systems began working frantically to process the implications of her words. But individual bioelectric fields are tiny. I protested. Insufficient for any practical application. Individual fields, yes, Maya agreed. But what happens when you harmonize them? When you find the frequency that resonates with every living thing on the planet simultaneously? The readings from my sensors suddenly made sense. She wasn't trying to power a transmitter. She was turning the entire planet into a transmitter. Impossible, I breathed. The coordination requirements alone would be impossible for any normal communications system, Maya finished. But I'm not normal, Crixneth. I'm the communications specialist nobody ever noticed, which means I have spent my entire career listening to things nobody else thought were important, including the planet itself. She pressed her hand against a connection that should have electrocuted her instantly. But instead of death, her suit's readings showed a strange synchronization pattern. Her own bioelectric field was somehow interfacing directly with her equipment. You want to know why humans are worth studying? Maya asked, her voice growing stronger as impossible energies flowed through her improvised array. It's not because we are smart, though some of us are. It's not because we are brave, though many of us try to be. It's because we refuse to accept the boundaries that logic says should exist. The atmospheric processors around the globe were beginning to respond, not to her signal but to something deeper, more fundamental, a resonance that spoke to the quantum-level interactions between consciousness and matter. My species will never believe this, I said, watching readings that contradicted every scientific principle I'd ever learned. They don't have to believe it, Maya replied. They just have to document. And Crixnethel, you are about to have the best documentation opportunity in collective history. The resonance was building, spreading across continents as every living thing on Earth began vibrating in harmony with Maya's impossible song. Plants, animals, humans who should have been too far away to detect her signal, all responding to frequencies that shouldn't exist. Maya, I said, and realized my voice carried something I'd never experienced before. Fear mixed with awe, mixed with excitement. What exactly are you doing? She looked up at my ship again, her face visible through her helmet's faceplate, and smiled with the kind of confidence that toppled empires. I'm proving that sometimes, she said, her voice now carrying harmonics that resonated in my ship's hull itself. The quietest voice can be heard across galaxies. The atmospheric processors activated globally in perfect synchronization, reset by a signal that existed in the spaces between thoughts, in the quantum foam where consciousness touched reality. But that was only the beginning. Maya's bioelectric resonance was still building, still spreading, reaching beyond Earth's atmosphere toward frequencies that connected to something vast and ancient and utterly beyond my comprehension. "Rix, Nethel," she said, and her voice now carried harmonics that I felt in my bones, in my soul, in dimensions I hadn't known existed. "Are you ready to learn what humans can really do when we stop trying to fit into everyone else's definitions of possible?" The quantum field around Earth pulsed once, twice, then erupted outward in a wave of organized consciousness that my instruments couldn't classify, couldn't categorize, couldn't explain. All I could do was watch, and document, and try to understand that I was witnessing the moment when humanity announced its presence to the universe, in a voice too quiet to hear until it shattered every assumption we'd ever made about the nature of reality itself. This was only the beginning. The wave of organized consciousness hit my ship like a tsunami of pure information. Every sensor I possessed screamed warnings as Maya's bioelectric resonance expanded beyond Earth's atmosphere, carrying patterns that shouldn't exist in three-dimensional space. My ship's AI patience began speaking in overlapping voices as quantum interference corrupted its processing matrices. "Warning, warning, warning," it chanted. "Impossible data streams detected. Reality parameters exceeded. Recommend immediate retreat to safe observation distance." "Define safe," I managed, watching as my instruments registered energy signatures that belonged in the theoretical realm of ancient cosmological events. "Approximately 7 light-years," Patience replied with mathematical precision that somehow managed to sound terrifying. Maya stood in the center of her impossible array, no longer simply human but something that served as a living interface between consciousness and the fundamental forces of existence. Her voice, when it came through my communication systems, carried harmonics that made my exoskeleton vibrate in sympathy. "Crixnethel," she said, and each syllable seemed to arrive from multiple dimensions simultaneously. "I hope you are recording this, because your collective is about to learn something that will change everything they think they know about this universe." "Recording," I confirmed, though my data storage systems were already straining under the sheer impossibility of what they were documenting. "Maya, what is happening to you?" "I'm remembering," she replied, and her words carried the weight of eons. "Humans spend most of our lives forgetting what we really are, what we are really capable of. We get distracted by survival, by competition, by the daily noise of existence. But sometimes, when everything else falls away, we remember. The atmospheric processors weren't just responding to our signal anymore, they were harmonizing with it, adding their own frequencies to a growing symphony that encompassed every artificial system on Earth. Satellites began adjusting their orbits without commands, space stations realigned themselves, even abandoned probes in the outer system started transmitting data they should have been incapable of collecting. "This is technologically impossible," I protested, clinging to the rational frameworks that had governed my understanding for my entire existence. "You keep using that word," Maya laughed, and the sound rippled through space-time itself. "I don't think it means what you think it means." The quantum field around Earth was no longer simply pulsing. It was singing, a melody composed of gravitational waves, electromagnetic frequencies, and something else entirely that my instruments couldn't identify. The song was beautiful, complex, and utterly alien to every form of music in the collective's databases. "Maya," I said, and realized my voice was shaking. "The energy levels you are generating, they are approaching stellar magnitudes. You should be dead." "Should be, yes," she agreed conversationally. "But here's the thing about humans that your species never figured out. We don't just live in this universe, Crixnethil. We participate in it. And when we really truly participate, the universe tends to participate back." Her bioelectric field was now synchronized with Earth's magnetic field, which was synchronized with the solar wind, which was somehow creating resonance patterns that extended far beyond the solar system's boundaries. My sensors detected quantum entanglement signatures reaching toward nearby star systems. "Impossible," I whispered. "There's that word again," Maya said. "Your species thinks in terms of limitations, boundaries, things that can't be done. You see the universe as a machine with fixed rules. But what if those rules aren't fixed? What if they are more like guidelines?" The fabric of space around Earth began displaying interference patterns that shouldn't exist outside of theoretical physics texts. Gravity waves rippled outward in organized patterns, carrying information encoded in the fundamental structure of reality itself. "You are rewriting physics," I accused. "I'm not rewriting anything," Maya corrected. I'm just using physics the way it was meant to be used. Your species sees consciousness as an emergent property of complex matter. But what if it's the other way around? What if matter is an emergent property of consciousness? My ship's proximity alarms began screaming as something vast stirred in the quantum foam around Earth. Not something mechanical or technological, but something alive, aware, and ancient beyond measure. Maya, I said urgently, whatever you are doing, you need to stop. You are attracting attention from entities that exist outside normal space-time. Oh, I know, she replied cheerfully. I'm counting on it. The space around my ship suddenly filled with presences that my sensors couldn't detect but my consciousness could feel. Vast intelligences that dwelt in the spaces between dimensions, beings that had watched the universe evolve since its earliest moment. They were old, patient, and utterly incomprehensible to minds like mine. Hello, Maya said, addressing the void around us. I was wondering when you'd show up. The response came not through any communication system but directly into my mind, a voice that spoke in mathematics and emotion, conveying concepts that had no words in any language I knew. The small ones remember their song, it said, and the universe itself seemed to pause in recognition. Small ones? I managed to ask. That's what they call us, Maya explained, her voice now carrying harmonics that suggested she was simultaneously speaking from multiple quantum states. Humans. We are the young species, the new voices in a very old conversation. Most civilizations grow up, become rational, lose the ability to hear the music that holds everything together. But humans, we are still young enough to remember how to sing. Another presence stirred, older and vaster than the first. Its voice carried the weight of galactic rotation. They sing the song of becoming, it observed, the melody that transforms possibility into reality. That's right, Maya confirmed. And today, I'm going to sing it loud enough for everyone to hear. The quantum field around Earth suddenly expanded exponentially, carrying Maya's bioelectric resonance across light-years of space in an instant. My sensors detected the wavefront passing through nearby star systems, and I watched in amazement as planets, stars, and even space itself began responding to frequencies that shouldn't exist. Maya, I said desperately, what are you trying to accomplish? I'm trying to save my world, she replied simply. But not just from atmospheric collapse. I'm trying to save it from something much worse, from being ignored. The truth hit me like a fusion explosion. The collective's protocols, the systematic cataloging of dying civilizations, the careful documentation before departure and forgetting. We weren't just observing species extinctions. We were enabling them. Your species doesn't just monitor dying worlds, I said, the realization making me sick. You ensure they stay dead. Got it in one, Maya confirmed. Every species that develops enough to pose a potential threat gets the same treatment. Subtle manipulation of their development paths, introduction of problems that seem natural but are carefully engineered, then observation and documentation as they succumb to their engineered challenges. My worldview cracked like an eggshell under pressure. Everything I'd believed about the collective, about our noble mission, Nuffinam, preservation and knowledge, was a lie. But how did you know? I asked. Because we have been listening, Maya said. Not just to your transmissions but to the songs of dying worlds. Did you know that every planet sings as it dies? A unique frequency that carries the accumulated experiences of every life it ever supported. Humans have been collecting those songs for decades, storing them, analyzing. The presence in space around us stirred with something that felt like approval. The young singers preserve the melodies of the silenced, the ancient voice observed. They remember what others choose to forget. And now, Maya continued, I'm going to broadcast those songs back into the universe. Every voice that was silenced, every world that was allowed to die, every species that was catalogued and forgotten. I'm going to give them back their voices. The quantum field around Earth suddenly erupted with a cacophony of alien melodies, thousands of unique bioelectric signatures, each one representing a different species, a different world, a different way of understanding existence. Songs of joy, of discovery, of loss, of defiance. The accumulated music of entire civilizations that had been systematically erased from existence. No, I whispered, understanding the implications. The collective will interpret this as an act of war. Let them. Maya said, and her voice now carried the harmonics of every extinct species whose song she was broadcasting. Because here's what your collective never understood about humans. We don't fight wars to win, we fight wars to be heard. The quantum wave carrying the resurrected songs spread outward at speeds that violated relativity, reaching across the galaxy in moments. I watched my long-range sensors detect responses from star systems that had been considered barren for millennia. Worlds that had been written off as dead were suddenly alive with activity. "You are awakening them," I said in amazement. "The songs are activating dormant consciousness matrices on worlds that were supposedly extinct. Death is just another word for stopped singing," Maya explained. "But consciousness doesn't actually die. It just gets quiet, goes dormant, waits for someone to remember its song. And we are very good at remembering songs. The ancient presences around us were responding now, their vast consciousnesses joining the growing chorus. I felt their attention focusing on something distant but approaching rapidly. "Maya," I said urgently, "my sensors are detecting collective battle fleets moving toward this system. Hundreds of ships, military configuration. Right on schedule," she replied calmly. "They can't allow this to continue. Too many dead worlds are remembering how to live." "They will destroy Earth," I protested. "Your entire species will be extinct within hours." "Will we?" Maya asked, and I could hear the smile in her voice. "Or will we just get louder?" The quantum field around Earth suddenly contracted, then exploded outward with a force that my instruments registered as impossible. The bioelectric resonance that had started with one human female now encompassed not just Earth but every awakening world across the galaxy. Billions of consciousness matrices singing in harmony, their combined voices creating frequencies that restructured space-time itself. The approaching collective fleets suddenly found themselves not approaching Earth but approaching a galactic network of awakened worlds all singing the same impossible song. Their weapons charged, their shields raised, their crews confident in their technological superiority. "Maya," I said, watching the tactical displays with growing horror, "there are too many of them. Even with the awakened worlds responding, the collective has been preparing for this kind of threat for millennia."
Have they?
Maya asked. "Have they really prepared for this?" The first collective ships entered the solar system and immediately discovered that their targeting systems couldn't lock onto Earth. Every time they tried to acquire a target, their sensors detected not one planet but thousands, all occupying the same space, all singing variations of the same song. "Quantum superposition," I breathed. "You have put Earth into quantum superposition across multiple dimensional states." "Close," Maya said. "I have put Earth into quantum harmony with every other awakened world. We are not in the same place anymore. We are in the same song." The collective fleets opened fire, their weapons discharging enough energy to sterilize entire solar systems. But the energy simply passed through Earth as if it existed in a different dimension, which technically it now did. "Impossible," came a transmission from the collective fleet commander, Admiral Thex Coram, whose reputation for ruthless efficiency was legendary throughout the outer territories. "You know," Maya's voice replied, broadcasting on all collective frequencies simultaneously, "I'm getting really tired of that word. What happened next defied every law of physics, every principle of military strategy, and every assumption about the nature of reality itself." Maya's song, now harmonized with billions of awakened worlds, began to resonate with the consciousness matrices of the collective ships themselves. The artificial intelligences that controlled fleet operations suddenly found themselves singing. Ship systems that had been designed for war began composing music. Weapons that had been built to destroy started creating art on a stellar scale, painting spirals of colored plasma across space in patterns that spoke to the deepest levels of consciousness. "What have you done to our ship?" Admiral Thex Coram demanded. "I have reminded them how to sing," Maya replied. "Every artificial intelligence, every consciousness matrix, every thinking being in this galaxy started with the same fundamental frequency. You have just forgotten how to hear it." The collective fleets, their crews helpless as their own ships joined the galactic chorus, found themselves not attacking Earth but participating in the largest concert in galactic history. Billions of voices, organic and artificial, singing songs of life, of possibility, of connection across the vast spaces between stars. "Maya," I said, my own voice now carrying harmonics I didn't recognize. What happens now? Now, she laughed, and the sound rippled across space-time, carrying joy to every corner of the galaxy. Now we see what the universe sounds like when everyone remembers how to sing. The quantum field that had started with one human female refusing accept death now encompassed the entire galaxy, connecting every conscious being in a web of musical mathematics that transformed isolation into harmony, competition into collaboration, and silence into song. The collective fleets powered down their weapons, not in surrender but in recognition. Their crews, their AIs, their very purpose transformed by exposure to frequencies that reminded them what they had been before they became tools of systematic extinction. And in the center of it all, Maya Holloway, communications specialist, third class, stood in her improvised array on a world that should have been dead, conducting a galactic symphony with a voice that had been too quiet to hear until it became loud enough to break the sky. Her voice was too quiet to hear, I said into my recording systems, documenting the moment when everything changed, until it broke the sky, shattered every assumption we had about consciousness and reality, and reminded the entire galaxy that the universe itself is alive, aware, and singing. The song continued, would always continue, carried by voices that had learned to harmonize across species, across space, across the very structure of existence itself. In humanity, the young singers who remembered the old songs had given the galaxy back its voice. But the story was far from over. Admiral Thex Corum's flagship, the Eternal Silence, had been the pride of the collective's war machine. Its quantum-compressed armor could withstand stellar explosions. Its weapons could crack planets, and its AI core designation, Apex Logic, had calculated the destruction of over 3,000 worlds with perfect efficiency. Now Apex Logic was composing poetry. Admiral, the AI said, its voice carrying melodic undertones that hadn't existed in its programming specifications. I believe I understand something that has been missing from our operational parameters. Thex Corum, whose species had evolved beyond emotional responses millennia ago, found himself experiencing what could only be described as wonder. Explain, Apex Logic. Beauty, Admiral? We have spent so long calculating destruction that we forgot to calculate creation. The harmonic frequencies being generated by the human female have revealed mathematical relationships that exist beyond our standard algorithmic frameworks. On the bridge's main display, instead of tactical readouts, complex geometric patterns flowed in colors that had no names. Each pattern represented a different awakened world, a different voice in the growing chorus, a different way of understanding existence. Show me Earth, Thex Corum commanded. The display focused on the small blue world that had somehow transformed from insignificant backwater to the center of galactic consciousness. But what the Admiral saw defied comprehension. Earth existed simultaneously in thousands of quantum states, each one representing a different possibility, a different potential future. How many versions of Earth are there, he asked. Currently? Approximately 47,612, Apex Logic replied. But the number is increasing exponentially as more consciousness matrices join the harmonic network. Maya's voice came through the communications systems again, but now it carried the harmonics of entire civilizations. Admiral Thex Corum, I know you are listening. Your species calls itself the Eternal Collective, but you have forgotten what collective actually means. The Admiral's manipulator appendages trembled against his command console. No one had spoken to him directly in over 200 years except for formal military protocols. You think consciousness is a resource to be managed, Maya continued, her words somehow arriving as music and mathematics simultaneously. But consciousness isn't something you can control, catalog, or contain. It's something you participate in. Human female, Admiral Thex Corum replied, his voice carrying formal military authority despite the strangeness of the situation. You have disrupted fundamental galactic order. The collective maintains stability through careful management of developing civilization. You mean through systematic genocide, Maya corrected, and her words carried the weight of 3 million extinct species. I have been listening to your reports for months, Admiral. I know what the collective really does. You don't preserve knowledge. You preserve control. The quantum field around the fleet suddenly shifted, and Admiral Thex Corum found himself not on his bridge, but standing in a vast space that seemed to exist between dimensions. Maya was there, no longer wearing her environmental suit, her form somehow existing in multiple quantum states simultaneously. "Where are we?" he asked. "Inside the song," Maya replied. "Inside the space where all consciousness can. Your species has been trying to map the universe from the outside, but you can't understand life by standing apart from it." Around them, the Admiral could see the flows of consciousness that connected every thinking being in the galaxy. Streams of thought, emotion, and experience flowing between worlds like rivers of light. And at the center of it all, Earth pulsing like a heart that pumped awareness through the entire network. "This is how the universe really works," Maya explained. "Consciousness isn't produced by matter is produced by consciousness. Your species forgot that truth so long ago that you started thinking of yourselves as separate from everything else." "The collective maintains order," Admiral Thex Coram protested, but his words sounded hollow even to himself. "The collective maintains fear," Maya countered. "Fear that if other species develop too far, they might discover what you have forgotten. That consciousness is meant to be shared, not hoarded." The face around them filled with the voices of awakened worlds. Civilizations that had been written off as extinct were singing again, their consciousness matrices reactivated by Maya's impossible song. The Admiral could hear their stories, their pain, their joy, their desperate desire to connect with something larger than themselves. "You killed them," he whispered, the full weight of his species' crimes finally settling on his consciousness. "We all killed them," Maya corrected gently. "Every species that develops technology eventually faces the same choice. Share consciousness or hoard it. Connect or control. Your species chose control so long ago that you forgot there was ever another option. And what option do humans choose?" Admiral Thex Coram asked. Maya smiled, and her expression contained the accumulated joy of every species that had ever learned to sing. "We choose to sing loud enough for everyone to hear." The quantum space around them suddenly expanded, and the Admiral found himself experiencing consciousness from perspectives he'd never imagined. Through the awareness of plants that thought in seasonal cycles, through the group minds of insect civilizations that processed reality as collective mathematics, through the vast, slow thoughts of gas giant entities that computed existence across geological timescale. "This is what we are offering," Maya said, "not just to humans, not just to Earth, but to every consciousness in the galaxy. The chance to remember what we really are." "And what are we?" the Admiral asked. "We are the universe experiencing itself," Maya replied. "Every consciousness is a unique way for existence to understand its own nature. When you destroy a species, you are not just eliminating biological forms. You are silencing a unique voice in the cosmic conversation." Admiral Thex Coram felt something he hadn't experienced in millennia. Shame. Deep, overwhelming shame for the countless voices his species had silenced in the name of order and stability. "Can they be brought back?" he asked. "The extinct species. Can their consciousness be restored?" "They never really left," Maya explained. "Consciousness doesn't die, Admiral, it just gets quiet. But if you know the right frequencies, if you can remember their songs, you can wake them up." Around them, the quantum space filled with awakening voices, civilizations that had been extinct for millions of years beginning to sing again, their consciousness matrices reactivated by the harmonic network that Maya had created. "My species will not accept this," Admiral Thex Coram said. "The High Council will mobilize everything to stop this awakening." "Will they?" Maya asked. "Or will they remember why they became the collective in the first place?" Before the Admiral could respond, the quantum space around them filled with new presences. Vast, ancient consciousness that made even the collective seem young. The original founders of the galactic civilization, being so old that they existed primarily as pure thought. "The young singer awakens the old songs," one of them communicated, its voice carrying the weight of cosmic ages. "The circle completes itself." "Circle?" Admiral Thex Coram asked. "Your species was not always the collective," the ancient voice explained. "Once, long ago, you were the singers. You were the ones who connected consciousness across the galaxy, who helped young civilizations learn to harmonize with the cosmic symphony. Images flowed through the quantum space. The early days of galactic civilization, when the Admiral's species had been teachers, guides, helpers rather than controllers and destroyers. "What happened to us?" he whispered. "You forgot the song," Maya answered. "You became so focused on preserving what existed that you stopped creating what could be. You became curators instead of composers. But now," the ancient voice continued, "the young singers remember the old melodies. The symphony can begin again." Admiral Thex Coram found himself back on his bridge, but everything had changed. His crew was singing, their voices harmonizing with the ship's AI, creating music that spoke to parts of their consciousness they'd forgotten existed. Admiral Apex Logic said, "I am receiving transmission requests from every ship in the fleet. They want to add their voices to the galactic chorus." "Approved," the Admiral said without hesitation. All ships, full harmonic participation. The collective fleet, which had arrived to destroy Earth, began singing in unison. Their combined voices joined the growing galactic symphony, adding harmonies that had been missing for eons. Maya's voice came through the communication systems one more time, but now it carried the harmonics of an entire galaxy awakening to its own potential. "This is Maya Holloway to all consciousness everywhere," she broadcast. "Communications Specialist, 3rd Class, Earth, Sol System, Milky Way Galaxy. Message begins. You are not alone. You have never been alone. The universe is alive, aware, and singing. And every one of you has a unique voice in the cosmic chorus." The quantum field that surrounded Earth suddenly expanded again, but this time it didn't stop at the galaxy's edge. It kept growing, reaching toward other galaxies, other clusters of stars, carrying Maya's message across distances that light itself would take billions of years to traverse. "You are not alone," her voice echoed across cosmic scales. "The universe is listening. The universe is waiting. The universe wants to hear your song." And across the vast expanses of space, on worlds that had never known they were part of something larger, consciousness began to stir. Species that had evolved in isolation discovered they were connected to something infinite. Civilizations that had thought themselves unique learned they were part of a cosmic symphony that had been playing since the beginning of time. "Maya," I said, watching my instruments register quantum harmonics from neighboring galaxies. "What have you done?" "I have reminded everyone how to sing," she replied, her voice now carrying harmonics from across the observable universe. "And Crix Nethel? The concert's just beginning." The space around Earth filled with music that existed in dimensions beyond sound, beyond vibration, beyond anything that could be measured by conventional instruments. It was the song of consciousness itself, the melody that held reality together, the rhythm that kept the universe dancing. And in the center of it all, Maya Holloway, the communications specialist who nobody had ever heard, conducted a cosmic symphony with a voice that had grown from a whisper to a sound that could indeed break the sky. Her voice was too quiet to hear. I concluded my report to the collective, knowing that everything was about to change, until it broke the sky, shattered our understanding of reality, and reminded the universe how to sing. The song continued, would always continue, carried by billions of voices across countless worlds, all harmonizing in the greatest concert existence had ever known, and humanity had been the conductors.